insight, learning, leadership, the Llama Lounge.
All right, welcome to the Llama Lounge, a dialogue on life and leadership. I'm Joe Bogdan, coming to you from normally sunny Northern California, although today on 4 April, it's pretty ugly outside. Well, I'm sure by the time this podcast is published, it'll be sunny again. I have with me the entire Llama Leadership team in the studio. I'm kidding.
What?
We can't afford no studio. so we're practicing responsible social distancing. I have Dub Scott Green coming to you from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Hello, everyone. I am, yes, like Joe said, in Corpus Christi, Texas. Normally nice and sunny, but it's actually cold and chilly right now and rainy.
I got Frank Zamorano Jr. coming to you from the Republic of Korea.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
All right.
Good, sir.
And the man who has the impossible task of keeping this crazy train on the rails, Jose Ramon Jr. out of Dover, Delaware. What's happening, fam?
What's going on, everybody?
All right.
That's probably the most we'll hear from Jose the entire time.
Well, he's trying to keep us on track, right?
We got this.
Yeah. Hey, so I got to tell you guys, man, I really didn't think we'd be here about a month ago, right? When we started doing our ops checks, and I didn't think we'd be here today. It had nothing to do with COVID-19. It was like early March when we did the ops test, and now it's early April, so it's about 750 days ago. I couldn't even figure out, right? I couldn't even figure out how to plug my headphones in, make my mic work. So I started thinking that podcasting wasn't in the cards for us, or at least me, but we here.
Yeah.
We're here, episode 1.
Episode 1. So we're experiencing some strange times, gentlemen. I mean, I think this is the first time any of us have experienced something like this, of this magnitude, minus Scott. But I think you're still a wee lad when Spanish flu took the world by storm, right, Scott?
I'm the old guy.
So how y'all hanging in there, man? What are you guys doing to help us get through this?
Oh, yeah. So I'll go ahead and start. In Korea, I really feel like the Republic of Korea, man, when they tried to attack this virus, they locked it down, right? And so they did a really, really good job of trying to mitigate the infection. And so that sort of that put everyone on notice. And so that also put everybody on the bases and USFK to do the same, to try and get rid of this thing. And so it's a little surreal because the streets of Seoul are empty, and the base is obviously a ghost town right now, just because we're trying to keep everybody inside, trying to keep people safe. And so yeah, hopefully we'll get past this thing quick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty wild out there because for me here, I think it's different from all of us because we're all over the place. Here in Northern California, it seems like when I'm going to work in the morning, the roads are pretty clear. But as soon as I get off, it's like everybody's back out there again. It's almost the same. So I guess non-essential folks, I guess, start coming out of the woodworks about afternoon time. But yeah, it's definitely a different type of life that we're living right now.
Oh, yeah. I get the opportunity to telework, which is great. But at the same time, I have 4 kids in my house. So we're all teleworking, so to speak. So I'll say our school district has done a good job of trying to get kids on board with online learning and those type of things. But there are challenges when, I'm on a conference call and I got a ton of noise in the background and the doorbell rings. We don't know if we should answer it. Is it UPS? Is it the Census Bureau? Is it, are we allowed to answer the door? What's the rule? So it gets kind of tricky, but, we're starting to get into a rhythm, which is nice. But at the same time, you don't want it to be too comfortable where we're, going to have a tough time getting out of this rhythm.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll tell you one thing, at least for my household, we're super blessed to be working. You know what I mean? Like, I really feel like bad for the families that are losing their jobs and trying to figure out how they're going to get the next paycheck to pay for the food, wherever that food may be, in these empty grocery stores.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty wild that, like, when we're going through this, and even me, I caught myself a couple of weeks ago thinking, man, coming back from overseas, I had all these plans that I wanted to do, and COVID-19 kind of hit. But then, just like what you're saying, Z, is, man, we're blessed, right? I mean, we have a steady paycheck coming in. We're fed. I mean, our situation is very different, but there are people out there that are suffering a lot more than us. So we have some opportunities. And honestly, like for me, even me going to work, whether I'm teleworking part of the week or at work, I'm finding meaning in my work still. And, there's a lot of people unable to do that.
I think the other piece is like, man, what is the world going to look like after we're done with this? Because this puts everything into a weird perspective where, man, like kids going to school, we've been doing that for hundreds of years. Is that even a thing anymore? Right? My 10-year-old is learning how to manage email. I didn't even know what, right? You know what I mean? So like, what does that mean for these kids after we're done with this? And do we go back to a traditional school? Probably yes, but it makes you think about, where do we go after this? Yeah,
no kidding. Well, I hope whatever ends up happening, we're all better off for it. And like Joe says, we have a better appreciation for the things that we used to take for granted, because, just the little things, just, being able to go to the movies or go to a restaurant, those are things that you would never have thought that, it's going to be a challenge to be able to do. And now it's a reality that we're I've eaten more home cooked meals in the past 3 weeks than I have probably in an entire year. We're so used to just comfortably running down the street to grab something, or, going out and do something socially. So hopefully, when this all dies down and things get back to whatever the new normal is going to be, that we do have a greater appreciation for each other and for what we do have, and a greater, responsibility towards others as well, treating people with respect and dignity. And I think I'm looking forward to it. I'll give you that much, but I just hope we're all better off for it later on.
Yeah, you got a date on when you think we're going to be on the downhill of this thing?
I live in a coastal town, right? So we are, I was on spring break because I work for a college, so we're on spring break. I was on spring break, and then right as spring break ended, we went into sort of not a lockdown, but teleworking. And even though we're on spring break, or even though the government's saying, hey, social distancing, stay away from crowded areas, if you were to go to the beaches nearby, they're packed. And so I
heard Padre was kicking.
Yeah, it's as if there was no pandemic issue, anything like that at all. So and you're going, and the challenge too is a lot of these people are from out of town. They're not even from the area. So if you get a place like San Antonio that's like an hour and a half away from us, and if it's a little bit more prevalent up there, the positive tests, well, you got folks that are traveling back and forth between here and San Antonio, here in Dallas, and so you're kind of like, just stay home. It's just one spring break. You're gonna be okay. Don't you have next year, but people are creatures of habit, and they want what they want, and sometimes I think good for us that we, with our backgrounds, our military backgrounds, we're sort of used to being told no. We're sort of used to being restricted in movement. And, hey, we're in an exercise. You don't move for the next 3 days. So we're used to that stuff. But the general society, that might be a challenge for a lot of people. Well, I've seen that is a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, man, I thought you were about to give us a date. You thought this was going to end. I was like, man, Scott got stabbed. I was like, man.
I wish.
I did you see how he ran around that answer though? He's like, well,
man. I was
a politician answer.
I thought we got to throw out a disclaimer and be like, hey, we don't know anything. Do not listen to what we're saying.
No, I don't. I know. I do have vacation plans in June that I'm hoping doesn't get canceled. So we'll see. Man.
I had a trip to Bali. Matter of fact, I'm supposed to be in Bali right now.
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to get on an airplane for a little while after this, even after it settles down, to be honest with you. So just to make sure everything kind of settles down all the way. But it's interesting what you're talking about, is because we have the lockdown procedures, or whatever you want to call it, shelter at home, shelter in place. I heard every terminology out there, but we're not if you even look overseas in China, they went full draconian methods on this stuff, and it's still starting to. I looked at numbers and it's starting to spike back up still, even though when they start releasing it. So there's a good chance that a second wave's going to come.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. But yeah, I think you guys. So you talked about a little bit about how we're kind of dealing with what we're experiencing, and we talked a little bit about how we're counting our blessings, but what else are you guys doing to kind of keep your mental sanity right now? I mean, you guys are teaching your kids at homeschooling, and you're trying to telework, you still got responsibilities at work, you're not able to do some of the things that you might normally kind of help you unwind. What are y'all doing to take care of yourselves?
Bike rides. It's kind of nice because my kids are, they want to go for bike rides now, which in the past they never wanted to. So now we're like, earlier today, I was like, hey, I'm going out for a walk because I got to get out. If you guys know me better than anybody else, you guys know I can't sit still in one place for too long. So being in my house cooped up for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, however long the work day is a struggle. So I'll take breaks throughout the day and just get up and go for a walk. But lately it's been bike rides. We get on bikes and just ride around the neighborhood and take about 10, 15 minutes and then get back to work.
That's the word. That's good stuff. How about you, Z?
Yeah, so we're pretty much doing the same. Minus the bike ride, we're staying fit. You know what I mean? Like I feel like if that's one thing that I can teach my kids, is to be, the stronger you are in your body, that's going to translate to mental resiliency. And so we actually are not supposed to leave the house at this moment, just as we try and clean up some of the positive infections that we've had around here. And so we're staying inside and we're kind of hanging out on the balcony like you see on the news a little bit. And so we're getting our sunshine that way. But other than that, man, we're doing burpees and crunches in the living room and just trying to hang out together as a family.
Yeah, man, I'm getting dope at burpees, man. I'm telling you that whenever it's like ugly like today, I'm pumping out some burpees. And then when I get a chance to go outside and run, because we're still able to do that here, I get some road work in. But otherwise, yeah, a lot of burpees, a lot of calisthenics. I was trying to get some kettlebells, and they're sold out everywhere. They probably won't be available again until like 2025 or something.
Oh, that and toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper too. Yeah, absolutely. So transitioning, man. So this is our pilot podcast. So I think it's appropriate to address like two questions that I'm asked most often about this side hustle that we make $0 on. What is Llama Leadership and why Llama? Those are the two questions I get most often. And I was thinking, Scott, man, could you enlighten our 2.5 listeners out there on what Llama Leadership is about and why we even chose the llama?
Sure. Yeah. So Llama. So what is Llama Leadership? It's 4 guys, 4 Air Force senior NCOs, 3 active duty, 1 retired. And by the way, we do have 3 active duty. So all comments or opinions do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Air Force or the Department of Defense. But that was nice, right? But we are 4 guys that at one point we were all stationed together at Travis Air Force Base in California. And we were all involved in either professional development, military professional education, or the Master Resiliency training program. And that's how we all got connected. And we all have a love for seeing people thrive. And I think that's what strengthened our bond when we first met. And we were involved, like I said, in the Master Resiliency program, where we would go out to the different units on base. We would go out to different professional development seminars and teach things about mindfulness and fitness and, making the most out of challenging situations. And so that's where we sort of developed our clique. And so where the llama came from, well, it depends on who you ask. But no, it's there's a million stories out there where the llama idea came from. But really the one that's probably the most accurate is we would get involved in different events on base, and a lot of these, whether it's a wingman day or some sort of diversity day. And one of the events we participated in that we were supporting was an autism walks day. And a lot of these events, there would be a petting zoo or different, agencies out there to help support. And this particular one, there was a petting zoo, and one of the featured animals at that petting zoo was a llama. And I don't remember who asked the question. We sort of said, why would there be a llama at a autism walks day? And I think it was Joe that responded, why wouldn't there be a llama? And so that's how we kind of adopted the llama as our mascot. And so that became our character, our mascot. And if you look at it, we think the word llama, 2 L's, and we wanted to be llama leader. So if we were to do an acronym of sorts, life, learning, and leadership, that's what we're all about. So the 2 L's for llama ties in there pretty nicely.
Absolutely. And llamas are majestic beasts too. They're awesome. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we've sort of ran with this for a while. About a year and a half ago, in August of 2018, we put out a website, a blog website, and a Facebook page. And there are a lot of different things that you can do. We're all military background, so we could have given it a cool name like Striking Edge or Eagle, something like that. But hey, we wanted to be different. We wanted to and really come from the heart with this too, and not just try to make it a military centric thing. So that's where the llama came from.
Yeah. So speaking of that, man, we got a bunch of great articles. Typically, we push one out once a week. Sometimes we'll push some old ones out, some classics out there. But recently, you wrote an extremely insightful and well-written article titled "The Antidote: Toxic Leadership and Can It Be Prevented?" Yeah. What inspired you to write on that topic, bro?
It just feels like it's been a headline that I've been seeing more often than not. And so I've been just sort of marinating on it and figuring out, like, man, where is this coming from? Is it followers that are just dislike their leaders and they say, oh, well, he or she didn't let me do this, and now it's toxic. Now it's a toxic environment, which very well could be, right? The other piece is, do the leaders even know that they're toxic? And so, man, it's such a wide spectrum of so many variables that could be going on within an organization. So I feel, sometimes I have to put these things down on paper to really flesh the details out. And so that's kind of what inspired the article.
Yeah, I think you made an awesome point though. Like, do these leaders that could be labeled toxic, right? Do they even know, right? Do they know? And are they doing it on purpose? Are they creating a toxic environment on purpose? And a lot of times, probably not, right?
No. And it's weird because I was asked a question when I was in an organization from a colleague, and they said, hey, are you going to be honest on the DOCS? And if you're not familiar with the DOCS, is basically it's a survey on how your leadership is doing, right? Are they effective? Do they take care of you? And so everything along those lines of responsibilities. And so,
like a climate assessment.
Yeah, like a climate assessment. Perfect. And so that really struck a nerve with me. Like, wow, are you going to be honest on that? And so the first thing I said, well, why would I not be honest on the DOCS, right? I think that's important. Is I need to have integrity and the courage, which I mentioned in the article, to speak up when I don't think something is being appropriate or effective. But the other piece is, I feel as a follower, I owe it to that leader to give them my honest feedback, right? When the opportunity shows itself, and obviously timing and timing is super important when you're giving somebody tough feedback. You just can't say, hey, you're sucking at this, right? I mean, that's an art in itself. So I just thought those two things really stuck out with me. One, would I be honest? And two, do I have the courage to even tell that leader that here's some areas of improvement that I think we could get on?
I've and I appreciate that, Z. I've had supervisors. Some of the best supervisors I've ever had were ones that would, they would give you the feedback of how well you're doing, and then they would turn around and go, okay, now what about me? What can I do to improve? And those are the best to me, the best kind of supervisors, because it shows that they are genuine in their desire to lead people. I've always had the mindset that you're not a leader unless someone's following you. You know, we like, and so there's like an emotive piece to that. So if someone's following you because they have some sort of connection or a bond with you, you're going to get more out of that person. But if they're following you out of fear, then they're not following you. They're following out of the concern about reprise or being punished, or, you know, in the civilian world, being fired.
Right. It's obligation at that point, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think you guys have made some good points on that feedback piece, because if they don't know, what kind of feedback are we giving? But as the leader too, like, how are we creating that environment where feedback is going to be given, right? And so I recently shared an article written by Robert Kaplan, where he talks about how the leader must create that emotionally safe environment where there is enough trust that the subordinate feels comfortable enough to provide that candid feedback. And that if that subordinate finally provides that feedback, the leader has a real small window to respond in a way to reinforce that trust. Now, we've probably all been the recipient of some constructive criticism. I know we have, right? All of us.
Absolutely.
Maybe, all right. And maybe some tough, harsh feedback, and have probably made the mistake of deflecting, making excuses, or even becoming defensive, even, you know, if we think back. And those responses really damage that trust and that credibility of that leader, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be willing to receive that. You know, I think the other piece is when you ask for that feedback, it's, you know, it can't be just, hey, how do you think I'm doing? And then they just zone out, right? Because I've had that before as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But take it seriously. You know, take that feedback that your subordinates or your teammate is giving you, and somehow put it in action. You know, and I will say this too, and I think I've talked to you about this, Joe, is the one-on-ones. That's the best time to really have that dialogue.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And I think when you do that, right, you get that feedback. And sometimes I think we feel like we have to respond right there as the leader. But I think it's a good tool to put in your thing and say, hey, yeah, I really appreciate you providing me that. Let me consume that for a little bit, let me chew on it, and then we'll have a discussion later about it, right? Because you don't have to respond right away. You might have to internalize it a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the best feedbacks that I've ever been given was from an anonymous survey based on my leadership. Yeah. And basically you would
that
go.
Was me.
It was a 360 survey.
I did that. I didn't even work for you, but
Yeah. Were you on there, Scott? Because it was like 10. It was like 10 folks.
Oh, I had a laundry list of things. No,
oh, wow. I'll be honest with you. It was a gut check, man. It was wow. And it was anonymous, right? And so these are people that I respected as, people that were on my team. These were colleagues, and then these were former supervisors of mine. So that was eye-opening for me. If you ever have an opportunity to get a 360 survey on yourself, on people that can give you honest feedback, man, you're talking about really, really getting your leadership capabilities to a point and really growing, because that's when you're growing, is when you can hear that and move on.
And you have to have some humility about yourself too when receiving those. And I recall in Senior NCO Academy, we did them in our classroom, and these are people that total were together about 2 months, about 8 weeks together. And it was probably about midway through Senior NCO Academy that we did these 360 feedback. So we didn't really know each other very well. It was all based off of just what we experienced in the first 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember one gentleman in my class looking at his, and he's reading it off, the responses, and he was turning red. He was angry. He was upset. And I'm like, he goes, oh, that's not me. That's not how I am. And it's like, dude, everyone, we don't know you well enough to really care at this. You know what I mean? It's not like we're going to go back to work with you when we're done with the academy. And so it's one of those things where people are just giving this guy, they're perceptive based on a short period of time. And if you have challenges taking that and being receptive to it, it's going to be a lot tougher if you can't be open to it from people who work with you on a day-to-day basis. because
Yeah.
they matter more than anybody else, you know. And so I think just like in a relationship, you got to be honest with people and you got to have trust with people, and people have to be able to tell you that, hey, you're hurting them or you're not doing the best job that you could be, or whatever the case is. If we don't allow ourselves to have feedback, to receive feedback, we're going to stifle anything that we're capable of doing, because it's like, you know, lifting weights or whatever. If it's like getting in shape, you know, I used to tell people back when I was in health promotions, if you were just running a mile and a half to test for the fitness test, you're going to have a horrible mile and a half. You got to, you know, so you got to work harder and put in more effort than what the bare minimum is. And if you have trouble getting feedback from somebody and you can't say, you know what, I do need to be better in this area and be open to those responses, you're not going to grow at all. You're just limiting any capability that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that humility piece is huge, like just to be able to receive it. And it's funny because probably some of that feedback he got was talking about how he might come off as an angry person, right? He starts losing his mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And trust me, if you're not used to getting criticism, and we made a mistake. And I remember, you know, I've been retired now almost 5 years. And I remember the challenge that we had was overinflation of performance reports.
Hasn't changed.
And I'm sure it hasn't. Yeah.
Changed.
So everyone earned, quote unquote, earned a Firewall 5. And the second you start changing that process and saying, hey, we're not going to give out, you know, Firewall 5s to everybody, all of a sudden people are offended. They're like, no, you've been telling me for years I was perfect. And that's the problem. You got to let people know where they can improve at. And if you're a leader, you got to be receptive to that feedback of where you can improve as a leader. Yeah, it's really about setting the example, right? If I can't take feedback, how do I expect people to receive my feedback?
100%. 100%. And that's what the big thing is when you, and I was talking about how you have that window, you know, you get the feedback. What are you going to do with it? Because if you respond incorrectly, not only are you setting a bad example, you just hurt your credibility, right? Because it's just lip service. You're just saying you're willing to receive feedback, but you're not really willing to receive feedback, right?
And you're proving the point that you're an ineffective leader.
Absolutely.
At that point.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where that phrase, that term toxic gets thrown out, is because you are not genuinely wanting to lead people. You're really more concerned about yourself at that point.
Yeah.
And so I think toxic is a strong word, and I think it's an important word. And if there's a toxic leader or a toxic follower, then something needs to happen. But at the same time, that word gets thrown out so much that it
way too much.
It loses any value. And you've seen it with other words like snowflake and toxic and, you know, whatever it is. You start throwing it around just because you're having a bad day or someone didn't treat you right. You know, I kind of follow social media, and there's some pages out there that talks about toxic leadership, and my leave was denied, my vacation time was denied, toxic leadership.
Toxic.
And it's like,
yeah.
But you don't really know what went on in that leader's mind to get to that point, or you know, a lot of the background to why they made that decision. And so that leads me to my point where it's all about communication, right? If you can effectively communicate with people, their perception of you changes immensely. There was a number thrown out there that says 90% of conflict is derived from poor communication, right? If I'm a great communicator, I can give someone the worst news ever, but if I deliver it in a way that's caring, if I deliver it in a way that's authentic, they'll be able to accept that news and take on, you know, whatever I ask from them. But if I do it just disingenuously, if I do it with an attitude, if I do it in a belittling manner, guess what term's going to be thrown back my way? Toxic. And so it's all about communication, whether it's giving feedback, whether it's receiving feedback. You do it the right way, you'll see that term toxic kind of fade away a little bit, in my opinion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like that was the point that I was really trying to make in the article, is that it's a two-way street, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you do indeed have a toxic leader, then as the member of that organization, you get to choose how you respond to that. right? And you could throw your hands up and say, I have a toxic leader, or you can choose to figure out how you can build your credibility and influence with that person to hopefully just get them back on the right track, right? I mean, when we talk about someone's circle of influence and circle of concern, a lot of times you're going to see we spend too much time in the circle of concern and not in our circle of influence, right? And so if you invest your time and energy in the circle of influence and things that you can control, I think you can start to see that as a member of an organization that you could really make an impact on that leader and that organization.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's part of it too is I think we talk about entitlement all the time, but sometimes when we're talking about toxic gets thrown out a little bit too much. I 100% agree. And I think that a lot of it is because people feel entitled to be treated a certain way all the time. And right. And it's a, I might, as a leader, I know that I should develop my people and I should care for them, and everything that I communicate with them comes from, a place of authenticity. But if I don't get that, just like to your point, Z, like I got to figure out how I'm going to respond to that and how I'm still going to grow and be the person that I should be instead of what they're turning me into because I'm allowing it. Right. So that's 100%, I think.
And I'll tell you from my experience. So I'm a little bit older than you guys.
A little bit,
just a little bit older. So I came in, I don't know, we probably all came in at different decades, right? When we joined the military. And so what would take place in my BMT or even at my first duty station, the way communication took place could probably get someone fired in today's, environment, right?
Oh yeah.
The supervisor, and we used to joke about the term wall-to-wall counseling, but I've seen wall-to-wall counseling. But at that time, and I'm saying it was a violent work environment, but at that time, that was the norm, right? And we didn't go, oh my gosh, this supervisor is a toxic leader because he, yelled at me or, let me have it, give me an Alpha Charlie or whatever you want to call it. But nowadays, if that takes place in certain, it's different for different career fields as well. But nowadays, if that takes place, that type of one-way directive type feedback, all of a sudden that person's considered toxic. And so you have to. I know it's kind of tough. You have to take everything into consideration, and sometimes again you're going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to get news that you don't want to receive, and that doesn't necessarily make that person toxic for delivering it that way. They may be at they got a short suspense. They got to make something happen right away, and they got to let you know right away, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it, and it hurts your feelings. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a toxic environment or a toxic leader. It just means that they're doing what needed to be done right then and there.
Yeah. And at the same time, if you suck as a leader, you're not let off the hook, right?
That's right.
It's going back to the two-way street. Like, all right, so now the member of that organization needs to figure out how to build their influence within that organization or with their supervisor. But that leader is not let off the hook.
Right. And that's where communication and trust comes from. So, for instance, if I work for one of you guys, and I've known you for a while, I know what you care about. I know what you're passionate about. I know what your expectations are. But if one of you guys came to me and said, Green, you're screwing up, this is what I need you to do different, and you're pretty directive about it, I would know that there's a good reason for why you are approaching me in that manner, right? Because there's already a trust there. There's already communication there. If that's all I heard from you all the time, it would mean either I'm horrible and I don't know what I'm doing, or you are horrible and you don't know what you're doing. And most people, like we already talked about, most people aren't going to accept it that they're the ones at fault. It's always the other guy. You always hear stories about, my leadership did this and leadership did that, and they go through all these investigations, they go through court martials, and all they do is blame leadership. When you know that, okay, what's the other side of the story? What's the third side, the fourth side of the story? Because as you guys all know, none of those things take place very lightly, and it's never really, a leadership decision to bury somebody unless there was a real reason for them to be buried, I guess. That's kind of harsh words. Can we say that?
Yeah. Can we edit that out? No.
Yeah, in the early 90s we could. And I know when my dad joined the Air Force and he told me stories about, things like that, they could talk like that. But nowadays it's sort of a different world, I guess.
Right. So like the term psychological safety. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have heard that term before, either via articles or TED Talks. Did that term exist when our dads or parents were growing up in a leadership capacity? I'd probably say not, right?
No, I don't think so.
Now, but if you looked it up, if you Googled that, it's going to show you a quadrant, right? And the different quadrants, I don't know all of them, but basically it shows you the zones of effectiveness. I call it one of them is like a bro zone, where that supervisor is a bro. They don't hold you accountable, right? They don't really hold you to any standard, but they're cool with you. And so when you look at a level of effectiveness there's not really one because there's no standards and accountability there. And communication is good because that's the other variable in that quadrant is how well you communicate as a team. And so I like the high performing one is good communication. They're not scared of blowback. They're not scared to raise their hand and say, hey, this doesn't look right. And so I really encourage you to study that if you haven't seen that for any of our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Man, that was a good discussion, guys. So
how do we tackle toxic leadership? So what, like, if you could give any type of pointer or like one thing to take away, what would you say that we could do to flatten the curve, so to speak, to use a modern term,
nice.
on toxic leadership?
All right, so for me, I think there's two pieces here. The article I talked about the institution. What's the institution's responsibilities? Now, that's when we talk about circle of influence, circle of concern. That belongs in the circle of concern. Whether or not the institution promotes these individuals who are toxic, there's nothing I can do about that. So I'm not going to spend any time in that zone there. Where is my circle of influence, and how do I prevent toxic leaders? That's just to be myself, to be sincere, and to have tact and keep my leaders accountable, and remind them to who they work for. And I say that with all due respect, but every leader in every organization works for the people underneath them, not for their boss.
Yeah.
Right?
They need to flip the organizational chart upside down.
Right?
Yeah.
And so my job as a senior NCO is to keep that model intact. And sometimes I get told to shut up in color Z, this is the way we're doing it. And I'll salute sharply when appropriate. But
there you go.
But I'm gonna be that right hand and tell that leader, say, hey, here's where we're at, here's what the priorities are. No matter how many other silly tasks that we have going on, here's where our priorities are. And so hopefully with that I can help prevent toxic leadership.
Yeah. How about you, Joe?
Well, I think the big part of it, and the part, because Z just hit it on the head, right? But when you talk about the portion where it might be the leader is not even sure, didn't even know that they're being toxic, right?
Yeah.
So how do you train your leaders to understand and what to look for? Because if they're just doing it out of malice and they're just, an evil person or just out for themselves or whatever that might be, I don't have time for that, right? My job is to make sure that they're not around anymore. But if they're just not competent, right? And I know a lot of people get upset about the word being called incompetent, but I mean, I'm not competent in a lot of stuff, right? So some of us need to be a little bit more competent in that. And then it's a training thing, right? And yeah, you can still be fired for being incompetent, but it's a different discussion. Let's have a conversation to find out what you're missing. So I think there's a big training. We're missing something on the training boat. And I'll tell you, I think I've been kind of watching it for the last couple decades. It felt like in the Air Force, I felt like we were just not really training our NCOs well enough, right? We're focusing on a lot of other things, but not enough on training those NCOs. And now we're getting a little bit better. Sometimes I feel like we overcorrected in some places, but we're doing a lot better. But those guys are now all senior NCOs, and they lack management skills. And sometimes that comes off. If you lack management skills, you can create a toxic environment. Maybe
Sure.
not intentionally, but
Right.
everybody's last minute doing everything because you have no idea how to manage your work center, right? Everybody's churning nonstop. And one of the primary roles, in my opinion, of a leader is to minimize distress on your people, right?
Yeah.
Not all distress, right? But sometimes you want to distress them a little bit for growth. But I mean, it's just unneeded distress, but you're creating it. You're creating that toxic environment and you don't even know. So I think there's a lot of ways, but a lot of it has to do with training and development and understanding how to be an effective manager and a leader. And I think that we start clearing up, what'd you say? Flatten the curve on toxic leadership.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right. But there's no easy tomorrow, turn a switch and tomorrow we're going to, get rid of all of our toxic leaders. Just like we're not going to turn a switch and suddenly there's no more COVID-19 in 2 days, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Didn't Air University start something? Isn't there a new class that they had started to prevent toxic leadership? I'm pretty sure I saw something on the Facebook.
Yeah. Probably. And we could probably even try once we figure out how to do notes for show notes, we could probably add some of that on there, right? But
in 3 months from now, when we have episode 2,
we're figuring stuff out, everybody.
Yeah, and I'll say, just to kind of wrap that piece up, I think it's all about communication. If you and building trust, if you can, I've let people have it before in my career, as far as being a very directive, but they walk away. At least, and I'm not saying I've never made mistakes, but in the times I'm thinking of a few instances where I had to be very, very direct with an individual or with a group of people, a team. They understood that it was for a reason, right? Because they knew me well enough at that point that they knew what my concerns were, what my cares were, that I wanted them to be successful. So not every negative news I gave them, or not every time I told them they couldn't do something, the word toxic was not thrown out, because they understood the bigger picture. And so I think as a leader, if you can demonstrate that concern for people, if you show people how much you care about them by building trust and communicating with them on a regular basis, they're not going to look at you that way. They're not going to look at you as a toxic leader, if they genuinely know who you are. Because I can guarantee you, the people that are being called toxic leaders, when they go home at night, they're probably tucking their kids in, thinking they worked hard, they did a great thing all day, and maybe not even realizing the impact they have on people, because they're not communicating the way they should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I've had a conversation with somebody that thought that I didn't like them, right, as their leader, and I didn't like them. I was like, so let me have a conversation. Why do you think I don't like you, right? And I think it's a good conversation to have. Is like, hey, man, I like you. You have strong character. You have no lack of work ethic. You're just making bad decisions, and you're not fully competent right now as a senior NCO. So we got to, do some work there. But there's no character issue. I like you, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of times people feel like if they're held accountable, that now the easy button is to say they just don't like me, right? And you can love somebody and hold them accountable at the same time.
It reminds me of my younger brother. Hey, Chuck, hope you're listening. When he was in
Shout out to
elementary
Chuck.
school, and he kept getting in trouble, and all his different teachers got removed from all the different classrooms, and his response was, "The teachers just don't like me." And I'm like, hey, what's the common denominator here, right? If you're getting kicked out of every fourth grade, class that you're in, you gotta take some ownership of that, bud.
Yeah, we got a denominator problem here. But awesome, man. Good convo, guys. So I'm thinking it's about time for us to wrap this one up. Jose's got a lot of work to do, slapping all this stuff and making it sound good. So you guys ready to wrap it up?
Yes, sir.
All right. Oh, hey, thanks to our listeners. We promise we'll continue to get better. Be safe out there. Stay healthy. And until next time, llamas are out.
All right. Peace out.
You good.
Thanks for listening to the show. We'd love for you to connect with us at www.llama-leadership.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/Llama Leadership, and also on Instagram at Llama Leaders. And a big thanks to Mike Whitmer for the music. To check out more of his stuff, go to soundcloud.com/Mike-Whitmer. Thanks again. See you on the next episode.